Alright, welcome everyone to another video in which I just check out VST plugins. This time I want to check out EXCTE snare drum because it's new and fresh, and I've seen a friend using it and it looked pretty cool, so I decided to just look at it myself. It is a free plugin, but it also has a pro version that is not free, so you can upgrade to that. It has a UI that pretends like it is resizable, but it's kind of not. But that doesn't matter because the UI already has a really great size, in my opinion. And yeah, the interesting thing about this is that it does not just play back a snare drum or something like that, but it actually synthesizes it. So analog modeling, which is something that I find very interesting. So let's just start the virtual keyboard and play a note. Sounds kind of cool. Playing different notes. Sounds all the same. So apparently every note sounds the same, just different velocity probably matters because there's a velocity thing here. Okay, this has a cool sound because when you turn up it sounds a bit thinner. It sounds a bit like you are a little bit further away. And here this one really has a tuck at the start of the sound. What is this for? What? I guess it is the randomness of the thing or something like that. But it's also not always the same when it's completely turned down. So when the tip hardness is actually on the more thinner side, then the Rimshot has an effect when you dial it in. To everyone who watches this who does not know a lot about drums, Rimshot is when you hit the middle of the drum. How do I show that? The middle of the drum, but also the side of the drum at the same time. Then it adds this flavor. Sounds very reasonable. I don't know why tip hardness has to be turned up, because I like the sound more when it's down. Yeah, that's the tuning of the drum. We will go back to that when we try to mix it with the rest of the sounds. Oh, nice. That's a little bit of the length, the release of the snare, which sounds better than just putting reverb on a snare. I like I like it tight. That's weird, it also retunes when the hit position is different. Okay, but you can reset it to the original position by just clicking CTRL and click, like in most plugins. The plugin also has sensitive mode and shift, like all good plugins, and it does not have sensitive mode on mouse wheel, but it also does not have mouse wheel movements in general, so that could be improved. But yeah, good enough for now. Okay, there's a little window that shows the basic information about the developer, along with a little button to give the developer some money, which I will do later, I guess, because up until now I think this plugin is really cool. The question is, how do I get back? Okay, I clicked on the logo, so clicking on the logo gets you back. A little thing I would do is actually letting all of the things except for this button let the user go back to normal instead of just the logo, because there is no other functionality here, so it's reasonable to get back like that. Interesting though that the plugin was made by the Center for Haptic Audio Interaction Research. So it is actually a research group that made this musical tool. They probably researched something about snare drums and then in the process decided to make a plugin to better get the idea across or something like that. Let's check the velocity. Actually, we need some non-virtual keyboard notes for that. For now, maybe without the beat. What is this finally? Great. Interesting, even the lowest notes are not like very quiet. They are actually quite loud, and because that's something special, because in most plugins low velocity steps are barely audible at all. Like I know a lot of Rhodes plugins where the fun starts at 20 or 30 velocity, but this plugin really uses the whole range. I don't know, I guess that's cool, because when some part of the range is not used, then why even put it there, right? But I also think to myself, what if I actually want the snare to be even more ghost notish than normally done? But I would have to use it more in practice to tell you more about that. First of all, what's the difference in sound? Actually, since it's hard to compare sounds by that have different volume, I think it would make sense to actually render out the sounds to an audio file and then normalize each of the notes and then we can compare them better. Only problem is that it's also a bit random, the plugin, as you've probably heard already, that it has a lot of little random aspects to it that cannot be turned off, and that might give us the impression that some note is can be generalized in some way while it can't. We should keep that in mind, but maybe we can still get a general idea about stuff. Okay, that's really weird, because some of these first notes have the rimshot in it rather clearly, then a lot of the sounds don't, and then it comes kind of back a little bit. I don't know if that is the randomness or if that's like intended, but I would have expected a little bit more of a drastical difference between the lower velocity steps and the higher ones. It sounded pretty similar, but maybe that is realistic. I don't know. I have never paid so much attention to snares actually, at least not in the same way. Like usually when I make snares in battery and I want to pretend like some of these are ghost notes, what I do is actually high cutting those. Usually not with Pro Q, but with the internal filter of battery, because Pro Q is not so fast and therefore not very useful for drums. But you know, it is just, the general idea is just that the general idea is that when a sound is a bit more filtered, then it's a bit more background. Don't mind the weird artifacts. That's like I said, because the filters in Pro Q take a while before they actually get somewhere. So you always have to make very drastical things and it's still not fast enough. But this plugin was just not meant to be automated like that. But it, just to get the idea across. Okay, so velocity steps are currently a bit weird, but there was a parameter next to the velocity and we still don't know what it is for. So we turn it up and check out how it sounds now. Oh, oops. Okay, apparently this really is a randomizer. So we turn down all the randomizers so that we can get a more accurate sound of what we see. One thing that I find weird is that velocity does not have its own knobby parameter. It looks like it's related to the other things, but it's actually working differently a bit. But I mean, it's not something that wasted a lot of my time now. It's just a bit of a weird design concept. Okay, I mean it tries to live up to the reality of snares, so there is no low pass filtering or anything like that, which is cool because it's kind of, it stays clean from all the fancy stuff that would say, oh, I'm trying to be an analog modeling plugin, but I'm also doing this and I'm doing that, and I'm actually more of a universal problem solver for snares. No, this thing is really technical, and it just says I am an analog modeling plugin. And when you want pure analog modeling, then you want me. That's what the plugin says. And that is cool style. And it really shows that this was made by a research group and not just by musicians. And now musicians might say, okay, but we are musicians and we want to use that as musicians. But I say that I like things when they are a little bit nerdy, and I already liked it like that when I was just a musician. So it's valid. Now let's actually try to incorporate the plugin with the beat. Yeah, so the velocity steps are really not going as deep as I would like to, as I expected already. You know, since some of these things are very nearly scratching zero. So, and that's always an indication that it would be cool to have a bit more range, because especially with these ghost notes, I would like some of them to just barely come through, to just be buried in the other sounds. So you have to listen very closely to even hear them, to give this a bit more dynamic. And then I crush it with a compressor, because the compressor is more to change the texture of the transients and not to reduce the dynamics actually. But even with the goal in mind to use a compressor after the plugin, it would make sense to be able to have a very huge dynamic before, so that you can go harder on that. But if the team thinks that a snare is not supposed to ever be so quiet, then I don't know, maybe that's true. I have never measured snares myself, but yeah, at some point it might really make sense to just pretend like it's possible in a plugin. And yeah, I'm still not so much of a fan that all the velocity steps have a lot of high-end crunch. Maybe that is a thing with snares. I guess it is. I wouldn't know that a real snare just randomly starts to use a low-pass filter, but it certainly makes it harder to use in this context. Actually, let's try something before I'm starting with a rant. We can still just use this thing as a low pass envelope follower thing. The problem is just that this is the updated version of Flower Child, and I have not used it so much yet. So if I'm making some weird stuff now, then that's just because I have not worked with it a lot yet. now I have the flavor that I want. Now I have a snare that sounds, that still, oops, not the right plugin, that still has the identity of a real snare due to analog modeling with a lot of interesting parameters that feel really different than with normal snare synthesizers or sample-based drum sampling plugins where snares are imported. So really interesting, really a different way to feel a snare VST, which I highly appreciate, but especially after adding this envelope follower driven filter. It also has some other modulation options which can seem a bit confused, but essentially the idea of this plugin, especially the first version of it, was that it has an envelope follower on the filter, and that's how I just use it as well. And actually, oh yeah, I see, I just learned something about the plugin. It has both modulators on both sides all the time, and both of them are always active, even if only one of them has the knobs visible at the moment. Okay, didn't know that. That was actually something that I was confused about before, but this video is not supposed to be a review of this plugin. All you need to know is that this is an envelope follower with a low pass filter, and there are different types of low pass filters and the parameters for the envelope follower and stuff like that. And I think the idea comes across. And what it does is that when the velocity steps are very low on the notes of the snare, then the envelope follower also does not push the filter too high. It has a very low pass then. It creates a damped signal, and the higher values sound pretty much very similar than the original snare. Not exactly. You can still hear the filter doing something, but it's pretty much back to normal, and that adds some nice dynamics as well to the sound. And it sounds a bit artificial on its own, but it makes a nice case in the context of this beat. Also changes something about the overall character of the high end, which got away from its kind of sound and to a more dish sort of flavor, which is very fortunate in this context. But that should not mean that I didn't like the sound of this plugin. It's kind of weird, but sometimes you just have to go through a certain sound and then process that sound in a certain way to get to a different certain sound that you would not be able to achieve if you tried to go to that different sound straight in just one step. It's sometimes something that requires multiple steps. Now, one thing that I want to explore in this video before going to bed, since it's already pretty late, is what happens when I click here. I just want to know what are the features that I'm missing out on at the moment. And we see it's actually a very reasonably priced plugin, just 20 euro. And if you are somewhere in the USA or something, that's a very similar price. I guess it's like 25 then also. Now let's see what the Pro version actually has. Additional features: sidechain input for external excitation signals. For instance, you can use a piezoelectronic disc on your mic input. I guess this video will explain it frequency shift for playing different resonances with external. Okay, another sidechain thing. Crunch parameter to change the timbre of the snare's rattle sound. Alright, I would say let's just check out the video together and use this video as some sort of React video.
The Center for Haptic Audio Interaction Research.
Wait, is it transferred the sound?
Is introducing.
Yes, it does. Okay, good.
EXCTE snare drum. It is a physical modeling virtual snare drum synthesizer. Today we are at Ben's secret studio somewhere in East.
First of all, I have to say this room looks very nice. It looks very comfortable, and I would love to make music in a room that looks like this. So the atmosphere is already nailed.
Germany. Ben edited a short beat with our synthesis plugin. Now he is adding in some fills by using a regular drum trigger pad. But instead of using MIDI triggers, he will be using it as a direct audio source to excite our virtual resonator.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Let's listen to the dry signal of the drum trigger pad. And now with EXCTE snare applied.
Let's do it.
Okay, I get it. That's pretty cool. So it's basically the pro version of this plugin extends its usage to not just be a VST instrument, but actually a VST effect. This brings up the question, is this available as an effect already? And no, it is not. So this would actually make it an effect. So I guess it is in the DAW available as an instrument and as an effect then. That's what I would expect. If this means that I have to route the audio output to the plugin in some way, that would be a little bit of a bummer, but it would not be a deal breaker.
A piezoelectric disc attached to your desk also works well as a sidechain input. You will find a tutorial how to build a simple piezo preamp on our website.
Okay, that was kinda cool. I expected this video to be very strongly related to all this analog modeling kind of stuff, but this was just straight up EDM riser made with a weird coiny thing and just one of the parameters of the plugin, the drum head tuning. And it was a very peculiar and still very straightforward and to the point being riser thingy. And it sounded very satisfying on my headphones since the plugin has all this stereo randomness. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about that. It's that was very good. By the way, another reason why I think that this is actually an effect is because it has dry wet, but actually I think now that it just means that the sidechain is dry wetted from the MIDI. So, but the thing that I'm really asking myself about is, how is it possible that there can be a sidechain input? Because at least in Cubase, there is no plugin. I've never seen an instrument plugin that has a sidechain input. Actually, like every plugin in Cubase that has a sidechain input, oh, I already had an instance, has this little button up here, activate sidechain, and then I can take some other track and send to that track, to that track's effect plugin. So in order to this thing being able to have sidechain, it would have to have this button, and then that would in turn require this plugin to have an audio input. And I think VST instruments are defined to not being able to have an audio input. Actually, I'm not sure about that, but I've not seen a plugin ever doing that. So there must be a reason why a plugin has never been found to do that. And if there is no reason for that, then this might be the first plugin I ever saw that does that, but it kind of isn't very likely. If it is really working like that, then wow, that's really incredible. And if it's not, then it might have a little bit of a weird workflow.
Download our VST plugin now at share.audio.
Okay, the video was very experimental. I would have liked some more examples about the more traditional use of such a plugin, like actually playing a snare drum, instead of experimentally making some very organic sounding noise, even though that's cool, but it seemed to me like that was not the main thing about the plugin, but the video was like pretending like it was the main thing. For example, I would have liked to have a better explanation what the frequency shift does and what the crunch does. At one point I heard the frequency shift in action, but it was on this experimental stuff, and I don't know if I saw an example of the crunch thing, but yeah, I don't know. Okay, system requirements, related products. Okay, this is just a free version, but yeah, let's just check it out. What is it? Is it maybe the information is somewhere around here? It is a VST3 synth, so it's definitely not an effect. That's for sure. But the real question is it able to get a sidechain input in my DAW? Because I've never ever seen a synthesizer receiving an audio sidechain input. And yeah, I don't want to spend money now to just try if that's the case. But if it's the case, then I might consider it. So if you know if it works like that, then you should definitely tell me about it. At the moment, I'm just a little bit hesitant because it says that it was not tested in Cubase, and I believe that especially DAWs like Reaper have more routing options, so they might just have some weird edge case options that are just not the case in Cubase, because Cubase is always very conservative about fanciness, which is a shame, but it's just the DAW that I use. And yeah, and if I can't use a certain plugin in it because of that, or if important features are missing out because of that, then that's unfortunate. Also Bitwig and Reaper are very, very known for their fanciness when it comes to modularity, and also, of course, because of that, routing options. So if if DAWs like this are listed, then that doesn't mean anything for Cubase. But let's just talk about the state that it has as a free plugin. It is a plugin that you get for free with a very clean and nice looking interface. It can, even though I'm not a fan of white interfaces, to be honest, but I mean, it's okay, it's not too big. The plugin has velocity, even though the velocity is not very nicely tweakable. It's just one kind of velocity. It has different parameters for the flavor of the sound, 5 parameters, and some of them can even be randomized, even though I'm personally not a fan of doing that, because even the lowest randomized values already have some random elements in it, and I would like to reduce it even more. Just because I'm an electronic music fan, I would like to reduce randomness even more. Controlling randomness is a big part of my approach to music. But I also like randomness, so it's not completely terrible that this thing is random. I would just like to reduce it a bit. And yeah, and even if something is missing in this plugin, like the low pass velocityness that I like on snares, then it can easily be added by just slapping another plugin behind it. And that's what I like about plugins like this, that are so technical and so accurate, that even though some features that you would like to see in them might be missing or something like that, they are always made in a way that you can just add the features yourself if you want to. So they really don't really have to add it, especially for people like me who know how they can get to a certain sound anyway. For the newbies, yeah, they might have a little bit of fun with this snare, but they might be a bit confused how to get it to actually fit into the song they are making when they don't find these options. But yeah, I don't know. I have the philosophy that on the one hand, a plugin should be so easy to use that everyone can just open it up and immediately get inspired, which is the case for this plugin. But I also have this philosophy that a plugin should not give the user the feeling as if they are kind of dumb or something like that. So all these one-knob plugins where you just open up one knob and then the perfection of the sound increases, that's not my thing, except if the thing that it introduces is a technical thing as well. Best example for that is Oak Sound Soothe, my favorite spectral compressor, where you can, even though there are a lot of knobs, you could argue that this is the main knob and that this thing almost makes it a one knob plugin, because you don't really need a lot of the other knobs just to get the sound to a better state. In most cases, using this knob already makes stuff better. Even though I would highly suggest everyone who has this plugin to use the other knobs as well, because they are cool and also very good to use. But yeah, that's the philosophy of one knob. You turn up one knob and it gets better. But this thing does not just randomly make things better, but it increases, like it also says, the depth of the filters used in here. And that is a technical thing. So it does make things magically better, but at the same time it stays true to its technical nature. And that's different than a one knob plugin that just, while opening up, goes through different stages where it has different wave shapers and compressor settings and kind of decides everything for you, and sometimes introduces some bad stuff, but not so much that you are very angry, but so that you are just a little bit fine with it. That's not cool. I don't like that. But I like this sort of flavor, where some features might be missing for some people, but they can just be added easily. They don't have to be part of the plugin. And that also, especially to get back to my initial statement, which was that stuff like this is fueling the creativity. When people are getting creative with plugins, they also get motivated to inform themselves. So, and that's also a reason why not every feature has to be part of a plugin, in my opinion. People would use this and they would try to make velocity stuff with it, and they would notice the velocity, even though it seems real, does not go as far as people want it to be, but it would definitely change the volume. So that's when people would think to themselves, well, what if I just use another plugin that changes that uses the volume of a signal to change a filter or whatever, or to apply any sort of effect to a signal. And then they would go to different forums or something like that on the internet and find out that this kind of stuff exists, and they would come back with plugins like that. And that's why they would not need it inside of here anymore. So if a plugin is able to pull off making people creative enough to and curious enough to find out about such stuff, then it's definitely good enough. Now another example for that, for this velocity thing. Also, this plugin has an envelope generator, now the envelope follower. If you don't know it, it's the first version of the saturation plugin of FabFilter. And now I can just go ahead and put the envelope follower on the drive. And now I made something very interesting with the velocity of the output of this thing, because envelope followers are just working like that. When a plugin has an envelope follower like Saturn or Flower Child, and your synthesizer has velocity in any way, does not matter which way, then the envelope follower will pick up the shape, the overall shape of the velocity, and then you can use it in different ways. Like I did before with a low pass filter, and in this case I used it to turn up the drive. The harder the sound already is, but then I did something the other way around. I actually let low velocity steps be compressed more to a pumping lengthy sound, while the higher volume sounds got shortened, because that's what this parameter does in this plugin. If you don't know it, it's sort of a one knob compressor, and I know I just said that I don't like one knobs, but in this case I make a difference because it's a saturation plugin and the compressor is only a side feature here, and it's and if you actually try to use it as a compressor on a signal, then you often get problems, because the attack and release settings it just internally has often not work with the signal that you send it, because you just can't tweak them, obviously. But in this case, since I wanted to get creative, it did not matter. And in such cases, it's cool when the sound is a bit pumping and weird, and that's why I used it, and that's why it's okay in this context. You know, it's always a bit of an intentional thing. If something is okay or not, depends on the intention. And yeah, anyway, I did this weird thing where quiet sounds have a lengthy sound and loud sounds have a short sound, by going into the other direction with the envelope follower from a high value to a low value of this knob. And that sounds weird, because usually when you hit anything harder, especially drums, you would expect the louder hits to release a bit longer, because they are just louder and it takes longer for the waves to fall, to decay into the nothingness. But I did it the other way around because I felt fancy, and it sounds really good. It has this kind of flavor, which is really nice. And now that I messed with the velocity so much, I could just go ahead and, first of all, I could try to exchange certain plugins and see what happens. This, for example, made it better in my opinion. Just putting the compressor after the first filter, so that Saturn actually acts on the signal that has already been tidied up from some of the weird transientness. And now if I wanted to decrease the knockiness of the snare, okay, actually that did not work very well. I thought it would, but it didn't. Let's try the same compressor but after Saturn. Now look ahead, enabled again, but different mode. don't know why I cannot remove the knockiness completely with a max out look ahead, because that's usually what look ahead is for, but it definitely reduced it a bit, and now it sounds very clean. And let's see how it sounds in the mix. Interesting, the knockiness also has a good effect on the sound when I turn it down even just a slightly, not even lower than a decibel, then it sounds way too thin. This range had something that was really falling behind the other sounds without this huge boost. This was the main resonance of the snare. Some people might argue that it would make more sense to turn it down, but I actually like resonance like that so much that I want to turn them up. What I don't like so much is the high end sometimes, which is why I dipped it so much, and it could have even more tweaking in it. I like this range, it really adds some dish to it. And this thing cleaned up the high-end problems that I had. And yeah, that is an overall nice EQ setting, I guess. I show you a little trick. I want to make a special video about it as well. But I already show it in this video, because this video is already an hour long and most people won't watch it that long anyway. So it's a little extra gift for the people who hang out for all the time. What I sometimes like to do is using the gain scale of Pro Q as some sort of macro knob to interpolate between no EQ and full EQ and twice that much EQ. Because the curve already does what it should, but maybe the overall amount could be tweaked. And that is a different mindset. And when I'd use that while playing the snare, then maybe we find a cool value. see, and I actually got a little bit harder on the settings that I already made, because it just felt a little bit better. And this trick, no, I won't go into the details now. I will do that in a different video. So, my overall conclusion, I tried to make a conclusion multiple times now. The problem is, it might seem sometimes like this is not enough. And I don't want to make it come across like that should be the overall conclusion, because as you can see, I did enjoy using this and it was cool to use, very easy to use. I could spend a lot of time on different effects, especially because this was so easy to use. So it's definitely awesome. The things that are missing in here are not really missing because it's a technical thing. But if the developers decided to actually go a little bit beyond this whole research thing and made a plugin that kind of brings analog modeling snares to the next level, then they could consider adding some additional features that are not integral to analog modeling snares, but just a nice little extra thing. And these things could be in a different upgrade that costs more than, what was that, 20 euro? 20, yeah. And maybe 50 or 70, I don't know. And then it would be a very nice snare plug-in with different purposes. I don't know if I've mentioned it. I think I did not, but I always tell everyone how much I don't like snare synthesizers, because most snare synths are just basically a bit of a white noise oscillator combined with a little bit of sine oscillator for the fundamental note, so that it sounds a bit like tf, along with a tok, and it's like twok, and I'm like, okay, there's like the basic idea of a snare, but it's not really a snare, it's two oscillators, and I would have to put thousands of plugins on it to actually give it barely the sound of a snare or of a certain vibe. While this thing really does the job of immediately giving you a vibe to work with, and you just have to tweak the parameters a bit. The vibe of a real snare. And it does not have parameters like white noise volume or sine wave volume. It has parameters like snare tension. I don't have to explain it. It's just a whole different mindset, and that makes it next level. So I would recommend this plugin after this little usage, even though it is simple and sometimes you might wish to have a bit more control over this or that, but it's still recommendable, I think. And I think I would use it even more drastically and with less post-processing effects if the context was not such an electronic thing. Maybe in a rock context you can just use it straight away, don't even have to do anything with it. Or maybe funk, when you turn up the snare tension a bit. Or jazz, if you turn down the Rimshot and just go very subtle with everything. I don't know. This video is long enough. I think at some points it might have even been a little bit boring, since I was also using other plugins so much and did not sound very excited. I am excited, but I'm also tired because it's late. I just wanted to make this video because I was on vacation for a week in the Netherlands and I couldn't make videos there, and I wanted to make this video for a long time now, and I could finally do this And that's why I just decided to say, I don't care if I'm way too tired to make a video, I will make a video anyway. And that's it. But I'm excited inside of myself. So please keep that in mind while enjoying the fact that this video is now finished.